mean, this is why I think that like tangibly speaking, the figures of the mutant and the human are actually useful here in a sort of an inverted way. A lot of people, the assumption is that you want to be the human and that other people are mutants, and the mutants are able to be shot, killed, expendable. Like maybe even they have some sort of like super ability to protect humans, but they're not like they're not like us. But I think flipping that actually works really well in this context because, okay, so think about if we take the human to be the standard. This human is the life that you thought that you were supposed to have as an American. Like when you were born, especially as a white American, like as a white male, like a white male-bodied person, able-bodied, whatever, like that is me. Like the life that I was supposed to have, quote unquote, is like the human. But then like as you go through life, you're like, wait a second, we live like I remember as a kid like asking, it was a common thing to be like, what would you do in Nazi Germany? Like, if what would you do? Like I guess like I don't know, what would you do? Like I would try to like hide people or whatever. Maybe I would try to like rebel, or like if I got drafted, I guess I would like kill myself or whatever. But like here we are, like, but like it was never part of the plan of my life to be actually in that scenario, and then here I am in that scenario. That's one way that my life is mutated. Another way, like you're supposed to be able to, I don't know, any number of like financial shortcomings that I'm experiencing are also mutations. I would say, like the pandemic was a mutation of that life. Like the life that was supposed to happen has been mutated in many ways. And then not to mention all the other ways that, like, I think that everyone can feel that in one way or another, whether it's a health, something that's come up for them and like all these medical bills they've had to deal with because of that. And every way that you are mutant compared to the standard life that you're supposed to quote unquote lead, all those ways that you are mutant are like ways that your life has been maybe toxified or just mutated. And you can see them as like making your life more inferior, like less like, but that is the supremacist way of looking at it, because the solidaristic way to look at it is to say that these are openings to understanding that we are all indebted to one another in an ongoing like exchange of resources and positions, and like we have to be flexible with one another and like appreciating what the differences that our circumstances bring, while also supporting each other practically in a range of ways that is not static. So like, yeah, I think that like embracing the fact that you are mutant, that your life is mutant compared to what it was supposed to be, is the same as saying that like not only is the standard only for an elite class, whether it's a regional elite or a racial elite or a gender elite or a species elite, but it's also not necessarily like the thing to be desired. Like you can see on the other side of that something else that you can strive for, and the ways in which you are not provided the standard life that you, or like the life that you need, or things that you need. You also see the connections in those lacks to so many other people that so a solidaristic understanding of being mutants leads to a communal like identity, I think, more so, that's actually more usable than the like maybe than the human is my position. But I mean, yeah, it's annoying because a lot of people would resist that, I think, on the left. So I don't know, like, is it annoying to bring this up? That. I don't know, but I think it is. I don't think it's annoying. It's meaningful though.
No, I think it's meaningful because I think it also provides a framework for how you can see Trumpism and the Republican Party operate, because as the definition, as the goalpost slides and the definition of human changes, you see these never Trumpers leaning into Trumpism to seem human, right? You can even bring in the racial context of like black and brown people who see as like, if I align myself with this concept of being human, I will therefore be given humanity, which is not the case. They don't have that same set of like solidaristic like reliances. There's no network of that. They believe that there is one. They are willing to be the if to bring in that like concept of like being like a mutant that protects the human, right? Like they're willing to play that role in the battle of opinions that they see, but realistically speaking, they are expendable. They are still mutant. They are dogs that are therefore, able to, pass in their society, but only in as much as they are relegated to a specific positionality, and they will be sent out to hunt out other mutants, right? They will be the Gestapo. And so the resistance, I think, on the left, or like anyone that like wants so desperately to have the comforts of the multi-million-dollar home but maintain somehow this like ideal of progressive identity, they don't necessarily want to be included with who they see as the enemy, despite walking, talking, and going to parties with them. Like how long will it take for their mutant, like what they see as their mutant defect, to like become so apparent that they have to disavow that thing in order to like slough it off in order to marry rich or to live that life of abundance when scarcity is the most rampant experience for everyone else, right? Like if they get to the gated community, they can have their community garden, they can play solidarity all they want, but they're still within a gated community. They're still keep excluding the mutant. And I think that's what makes it so difficult for someone who is an establishment oriented person to accept that they are aberrant, or that they are somehow other in a society that they so desperately want to maybe even claim ownership to, but just claim connectedness with, at the very least. Like they want to be a part of a specific species, and they will do anything that they can to be defined in that category.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the counters to this stuff would be that like we need, I mean, people gravitate automatically towards in-groups, so like we need some kind of in-group to mobilize, because, and like, I mean, I guess I mean, it's kind of a bold thing, but I think that a lot of people would not, yeah, so I guess ultimately this is kind of like the radical end of like identity and existential like politics, but I think that there's a problem with like, so basically like how do we, there are still standards of life that we want to be advocating and providing for people. Like we are trying to bake, like we're trying to, like if you're, I guess, how do you marry like this flexibility, almost this sort of like anarchic like acceptance of, or like rejection of the status like quo? How do you marry that with a advocacy for universal health care and like universal programs and like the types of sewer socialism that I think we are trying to also like accomplish, like that we're trying to actually win for society?
Yeah, but I think that that's where the state as a fixture in the human experience comes in, because we have to reckon with the broadness of the state and its power. And to say that we will completely do away with that process is to be kind of quixotic and to be maybe foolish.
I guess, so, we never, like, a mutant is not a non-urban entity. Like, the mutant exists in urban environments as well as rural. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so it's like, I think that the, like, if I'm sort of engaging with that criticism, I think that the call to have drastic means to a more holistic end doesn't necessarily disavow the boons that a state can offer. And to mutate or toxify the state is different than like complete utter destruction of everything. Like, we're not accelerationists. We're not trying to say that like everything must be razed to the ground and it's every man for themselves. We're returning to a state of nature, because that's like a very libertarian,
Right.
like,
Well,
seasteading type deal. Like,
it's also
we're not trying to create.
Yeah, it's also a gesture towards a sort of like a sort of default, which I don't think which I think the Mutant Project is like there is no default, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Like,
So, yeah.
adaptation is the name of the game.
Yeah.
Or at least the way that I see it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that like it's, I guess you could say like the common, like we are looking, because I mean the Mutant is the common experience, is like a common, it's like another way of saying like the people, but just like expand. I think the people versus the human, I think, is even pretty interesting. Like I think that like but I mean, even then it's like we don't want to be like, we're also not proposing. I think that this project speaks to people who have, I mean, I personally have been like infected with a sort of individuality and sort of like a desire to be unique and to like experience new forms of existence and like not be shackled to like any kind of standard. Like, I think that having societal standards is one thing, but I don't know. I think that like a lot of people are pretty interested in like trying to expand and experiment with like what types of life are acceptable and enjoyable and worthwhile. Whether it's like the even like people's stakes on polyamory or whatever, the popularity of that, or any kind of queerness, or like there's so many different examples of ways that people are kind of like, or like neurodivergence, like people are trying to adopt and accommodate these like non-standard forms of existence and be like, this can be celebrated and included in our common being more and more. And I think that's a good, like, we can couple that with, I think that if you focus on the mutant as like the figure that you are advocating for in your policy, that works even better than like the person or the citizen. I mean, you know, yeah.
Well, because like, at least, speaking from my like lived experience, right? Like, I will never live in America or even in the world without the sort of prefix of being a black person, right? Like, I
Right.
my personhood is always, subject to interrogation, and so like, I think like the mutant standardizes substandard positionalities. It like creates more nuance than
Right.
simple terms that are legally defined, right? Like, and I did a poor job of explaining sort of how definitions by law is also part of like corporate and political capture, right? Like, there's a certain way in which by becoming engulfed into the state, you are therefore subjected to the leaders of the state, and they get to define who you are and how you act. Namely, if we're going to go back to the DC example, like, if you're going to try to treat teens like adults, then why, like, the term for adult gets sort of murkier, and then you have to do all sorts of mincing your words to try to define those terms. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, there is a means by which having more liberatory views of identity frees people up from very specific cornering labels that allow the state to other people, if that makes sense, or other individuals.
It's true. Actually, this is an interesting discussion about like universality, because I think that, I mean, so like if you say like a person does this, a person does that. Well, the thing is people like I don't know, whatever, like this or that. The thing is that like that actually is not. There's always exceptions. Like, and also like insofar as like racial difference is meaningful in America, as an example, you will also have like statistical differences along the lines of race or whatever, or gender,
Right.
or what have you. So those things are true, but like so like when you make a blanket statement about like people, then sometimes you actually miss the nuances of like how it affects different like racial groups or gender groups or whatever. But then this stuff all gets like more complex than that too. Like it's actually becomes way more about like neighborhood or like literal area code or whatever than it does about race. You know, so like these are these things are like arbitrarily constructed, but even though they also have meaningful implications as well. And I guess like another thing to like pair this with is like the understanding of like universal programs as being like actually benefiting the downtrodden. Like I think people hear universal, like universal healthcare, universal like mandatory public school or something, or like universal this, universal that, or like universal whatever. And people sometimes think that that is like
right to housing, that sort of thing.
Yeah, universal, right? Universal like public housing, yeah, right, affordable housing, whatever. Like I think sometimes people hear that and they think that that is like eliding or covering up like the differences in need among different communities. Like if you have a universal program, does that just kind of ignore the specific needs of like the Black community in a given area? But I think that like the leftist trajectory from which the idea of universal XYZ comes from is about actually finding the specific needs of each of the different parties that are going to be, you know, benefiting from this program, and actively seeking to to provide them with these things, which might look different for different communities and will look different for like almost every area code. Like if it's universal school lunches, well, we need to figure out like what the needs of different, like maybe one group is has a bunch of like Muslim kids or whatever, they like don't eat pork, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and so so it and I think that idea, that leftist value of universality, actually applies very well to the Mutant project, because the Mutant implies that everything is going to have its own kind of unique needs and its own unique circumstances that you need to accommodate. But it's a universal without being universalizing.
Yes, because I was going to say that I think a lot of the critique comes from the idea that communities and or resources are static, and these are also things that are changing. So as the universal resources that we're trying to create or that we're advocating for also adapt and change as demographics change, as the need requires, right? So like, yes, maybe one year everybody is having an iron deficiency, so we need to eat a lot more of a certain thing in order to help everyone. Like in the COVID era, wearing masks and needing sort of aspirators and other types of like respiratory protections and or aids, that wasn't a huge thing, but we adapted as a society to some extent to try and reincorporate that to protect more people. So it is possible, like, and even in those destructive moments, such as COVID and like, you know, the management of that, there is a way that society tries to like adapt to toxification, and as everybody is toxified or infected, right, with a literal virus, right, we are prone to adaptation. So we're almost talking to a more holistic version of the human in all regards with this project, I think.
Right. I mean, and then also there's also like, I think, not to mention, or whatever, to mention, I don't know, but it's also worth mentioning that like the like blatantly non-human, the life forms that like by no definition would fall into the category of human, that are also, I mean, I would argue, I mean, they're also quite relevant, not only to human survival, but also to the picture. Like, yeah, and so like you don't want to forget about them either. Like from my perspective, from where I'm sitting, like that stuff is also very, very important. Like, yeah, and I think, you know, it's kind of another, I mean, thing that the Mutant does better than the, you know, but whatever. Like, yeah, but you know, this stuff is all
but the connotation, right, is a hard PR sell.
It is a hard PR sell to be like, to say that like people matter the same amount as squirrels, but yeah.
But also, I think that like that gets back to, I don't know, certain like indigenous practices, right? Of like honoring the soul, spirit, and or like internal entity of a living creature, including plants, right? And I'm not speaking to a specific tradition, but I'm just saying that there are so many diverse ways of
Yeah.
understanding our world that don't include or don't exclude the natural world from the, I guess, to speak species human experience,
Yeah, totally.
that like acknowledge that interconnectedness.
Yeah. It's not
So
to say
yeah,
that like a plant experiences things the same way as a human, but like these things are I mean, these, I think they're definitely worth thinking with and about, and because like we live with them. So yeah.
right, yeah, no, of course, absolutely. And I wanted to bring up, and this is a bit of a tangent, but did you hear about that like UFO slash comet thing that's supposed to hit Earth in November or
Okay,
whatever?
we got a new thing.
Exactly, a new crazy thing, but it's
November?
just very funny. Yeah, look it up if you want. There was supposedly some sort of like asteroid that's like for the first time gonna like is on a direct crash course for Earth, and I have since forgotten what any of that impact would be, because it gets lost with the meme of like, all right, yeah, aliens are coming, but I still need to like free healthcare, you know what I mean, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
um but yeah, I think that, one, that was just a funny exercise, but two, um I think the
Three Eye Atlas? What is this?
yeah, look it up. Like I was just gonna point out that I think bringing up these things and trying to sensationalize them is an attempt at unity along the grounds of the same type of like sterile concept of like we are human and we must destroy other.
Mm.
But there are ways in which we could like in what's that movie about that language? You know what I'm talking
Oh, well, I
about?
mean, like Contact, or like the new one is Arrival.
I think it is Arrival. Yeah. Dang. Yes, Arrival. I saw that movie. I really loved it, and it was a very fun thought process in like, okay, how can we interact differently with the other, especially as the other is not always seen as a violent entity by some, but
Yeah.
by the state always. It is imperative that anything that enters into our domain must be conquered or repelled.
Yeah. Just, that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah. No, yeah. Sorry, I just laughed at that, like when we were thinking of like other entities. I was like, oh yeah, there's that one thing that was in the news.
Yeah, yeah. No, but I mean, like, aliens don't even get me. Like, there's a whole thing with that, too, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of nice to have these, like, topical things, because part of me has been kind of like, it's hard to almost justify. Sometimes it's hard to like justify or contextualize the work that we're doing in other areas like philosophy and identity stuff. But it's
Yeah.
like this stuff is like tangibly related to everything else. Um, and like even if it wasn't, like it wouldn't mean that doesn't mean that like this stuff isn't worth continuing to think about. But
Mm-hmm.
um, like like the Gaza thing is pretty crazy, and it's kind of hard to justify talking about anything. I don't know, like whatever. But at the same time, it's
No,
like
I
it is all related, and it's like philosophizing and thinking is like a necessity that I think that is a muscle and like a practice that just feels so good, and it's so important to. And also, like these things are all entwined. Like I think that fascism has cultural philosophical tenets, and like we have to be working on those as well. Like you can't just be like resist, resist, resist. You have to actually like think about stuff. Sometimes not even. Yeah, but anyway, it's just nice to like kind of fit the Immune Manifesto into like context every now and again.
no, I completely agree, and I think we, as we develop and philosophize, I think we're doing archival work as well, and like
Hmm.
because there's going to be, hopefully there's a 20 years down the line that people are able to study this and like actually see what happened and articulate it and grow past it. So I think part of that work is doing it now so that others can pick up and where we left off. So, yeah.
The people who matter, we see you, we're watching you, and we're going to change the law to catch you.